This episode of The Curbsiders is brought to you by ACP's IMpower series. IMpower covers a wide variety of topics valuable to residents at every stage of their training and beyond. We've made episodes for each year of residency as well as for the transition into early career. For all the handouts and figures associated with our episodes, as well as a bunch of other resources the ACP has put together, visit acponline.org/IMpower. Maybe Stuart and I are co-interns and Paul's our sub-I or something like that.
Just make it as tortured as possible.
I think Paul, you've been promoted to sub-I.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What's my motivation on my post call? How am I feeling today?
Curbsiders podcast is for entertainment, education, and information purposes only, and the topics discussed should not be used solely to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases or conditions. Furthermore, the views and statements expressed on this podcast are solely those of the host and should not be interpreted to reflect official policy or position of any entity, aside from possibly Cash Like Moral Hospital and affiliate outreach programs, if indeed there are any. In fact, there are none. Pretty much, we aren't responsible if you screw up. You should always do your own homework and let us know when we're wrong.
The identification of specific products or scientific instrumentation is considered an integral part of scientific endeavor and does not constitute endorsement or implied endorsement on the part of the authors, Department of Defense, or any component agency. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the authors and do not reflect the official policy of the Department of Army, Navy, Air Force, Department of Defense, or U.S. government.
Hey, guys.
Hi. Hello.
It just never ceases to be jarring.
Yeah, we got to work on. I'm working on new intros, but all I can think to say is "Hi, guys."
But you come in super energetic, and then Stuart not only matches your energy, but then tries to surpass it, and then meanwhile I have a quiet panic attack in the corner. It just really we have to do something else.
Right. Well, gentlemen, this is another one of our IMpower episodes. We're going to be talking about becoming a PGY3. No, it's not just the same as PGY2 year. We'll tell you why, basically, throughout the entire episode. But before we do all that, Paul, why don't you tell the audience, what do we do on this show, Paul? What are we doing with ourselves?
Yes, I'd love to, Matt. Thank you so much for asking. We are the Internal Medicine Podcast, and we use expert interviews to bring you clinical pearls and practice-changing knowledge. We have three outstanding guests who are going to help us define and clarify what PGY3 year entails and why it's not just more of the same. And Stuart is going to tell us about our first two guests.
That's right. The first of our first two guests is Dr. Kim Fabyan. She's an active duty captain in the United States Army Medical Corps. She attended medical college at Georgetown University School of Medicine and internal medicine residency at the National Capital Consortium at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. She currently serves as one of two chief residents at the National Capital Consortium. Her hobbies include bowling and feeding birds in her backyard. The second of our first two guests is Dr. Jeffrey Gray. He is an active duty lieutenant in the United States Navy Medical Corps. He also attended Georgetown University School of Medicine and completed residency in internal medicine also at the National Capital Consortium program at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He is currently one of two chief residents at the National Capital Consortium. Alternatively, he enjoys hiking, camping, and cheering for the Maryland Terrapins. Terrapins. What is it?
Whatever.
No, just keep trying. I think let's just do five tight minutes of this.
Terrapins.
Great. And our last guest / host is Dr. Joshua Hartzell. Lieutenant Colonel Joshua D. Hartzell serves as the program director of the National Capital Consortium Internal Medicine Residency at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and that's a lot of letters. Dr. Hartzell attended the Uniformed Services University School of Medicine, graduating in 2002, and then went on to Walter Reed Army Medical Center for his residency in internal medicine. He served as chief resident until starting his infectious disease fellowship. He then completed an assignment as the associate program director for the internal medicine residency, assistant chief of graduate medical education, and Army intern director at WRN MMC prior to joining the Uniformed Services University in 2016. There, he served as the assistant dean for faculty development. He was responsible for the professional development of over 4,000 faculty and delivered over 100 faculty development workshops. He holds the rank of professor of medicine at the USU. He is a graduate of the Stanford Faculty Development Facilitator course, a Harvard Macy graduate, and faculty in the Harvard Macy Leading Innovations course, and completed a Master's of Science in Health Professions Education at Mass General Institute of Health Professions in 2017. His academic interests include faculty and leader development. Dr. Hartzell is committed to improving healthcare and personal well-being by developing leaders.
We met this wonderful crew when we went down to Walter Reed to give a grand rounds, and we're so impressed by them that we just had to bring them on the show to share their brilliance with everybody. So please enjoy this wonderful discussion with the crew from Walter Reed.
It's quite a motley crew.
Josh, Kim, Jeff, you're here. Thank you for coming and joining us finally. This is you had us down to Grand Rounds, to your place. Now we're having you to the interwebs, to our place. It's great to have you all here.
Excited to be here.
Let's start with Josh. Can you give a one-liner to the audience? Describe yourself a bit, maybe give them a hobby or interest outside medicine.
Sure. I'm a 43-year-old internist, infectious disease doctor, Army officer, and program director who loves medical education and, in particular, faculty development. My real passion is helping people reach their full potential and develop as leaders. I'm married to a rheumatologist with 2 kids, a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, who occupy all of my spare time. And I'm a part-time basketball and baseball coach, and I love all things Pittsburgh and bleed black and gold.
Okay, pretty good. Kim?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a 29-year-old internal medicine chief resident, married to a general surgery resident. And as a power couple, we like to host interdisciplinary board game nights, go bowling, and spend time outdoors. Personally, I'm working on my deadlift, currently up to 110 pounds.
Which is probably, that's a good percentage of what you weigh, I'm sure. That's a lot. That's good.
Greater than 100%. I'm a huge medicine nerd with a passion for medical education and budding social media presence.
All right. Well, good luck with the social media presence. This may help. We'll make sure you're tagged and everything. Jeff, what's your one-liner?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can top those, but 30-year-old with as the other two, deep love of internal medicine and medical education, in particular, improving medical education. Also a recreational outdoorsman and a diehard Maryland Terrapins fan, which I've grown to realize is essentially a cardiovascular risk equivalent.
And you don't have to give us your deadlift number. I don't want to create a competition between chiefs here. So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sure. So let me, having talked with you guys being Kim and Jeff, both of you have this passion for medical education that I didn't discover until I think well past residency. So I'm wondering, why don't we start with Kim? But I'd ask Jeff the same question. Where did this come from originally? When did you start realizing that you liked teaching as much as you liked learning about medicine?
Oh, Paul, awesome question. My love for teaching actually came before my love for medicine. So started in college as a reading specialist for one of the local elementary schools and really saw myself as a teacher. And during the course of my undergraduate career, started to pursue medicine, but always loving teaching.
What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, similarly to Kim, when I was in college, I was a supplemental instructor for an introductory biology class, which I really enjoyed, and then started teaching more as a kind of near-peer mentor during medical school. And then actually during entry year, Kim and I developed an intern study group together and really grew as peer teachers and also learned a lot from our colleagues. So really since then, it's just continued to grow.
This reminds us of a certain precocious medical student who might appear in our cases later today. Well, before we get into talking more about your love of teaching, and there's going to be tons of, instead of doing our normal career advice thing, since this whole show is like career advice, we're going to jump into talking a little bit about picks of the week. We'll start with Paul Williams, and then we'll go around and see if anyone else has anything they'd like to recommend.
Sure. Thanks. As always, I think I'm going to pick something that is completely non-relevant, possibly emotionally gutting, and mostly just an excuse to find someone to talk to me about a movie. This time around, I'm going to recommend High Life. It is the 2018 science fiction, I guess kind of characterized as a horror film, directed by Claire Denis. It stars Robert Pattinson, who you may know from the Twilight series, but who has meanwhile evolved into one of our most interesting actors. He just quietly does these neat small indie movies now. And I can't even explain the plot to you, but basically it's set in the unspecified future where a group of criminals are launched into space into a black hole to harvest energy, and it uses that backdrop as a way to sort of just explore the human condition. And it's quiet and kind of disgusting, but also hypnotic and sort of beautiful at the same time. And it's completely unexplainable. And like most of the movies I recommend, I just need someone to talk about it with. So if any of our listeners could please watch the movie High Life, I would appreciate it.
Paul, I'm going to watch this one just for you.
I cannot wait to hear your review.
Well, no, it's really along the lines of things that I like to watch. I mean, I love sci-fi, not so much horror, but
Stuart,
whatever.
we've never done this before, but can I request a pick of the week from you? There was we didn't have time on a recent show. You had a Twitter account or something that you wanted to request some pun.
It is not my sock puppet account, Paul. It's medical puns on Twitter, and I don't know. It's kind of near and dear to my heart because it's just medical puns. It's
Stuart.
Tweets. It's not me. It's not me. And they only have 67 followers.
It is in fact my heart.
He's like, in fact, if my heart stopped pumping, then the account would no longer exist. Because...
So here's one. What did the retiring cardiologist say on his last day to the first-year fellow? Keep aspirin. It's not me, although it sounds like something I'd say. Keep aspirin. Keep aspirin.
Oh, no, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's not me.
Can anyone recover from that with a pick of the week? Josh, did you have something you wanted to recommend to the audience? I know you're always like
sock puppets,
reading, learning, anything you wanted to recommend to people?
Well, it's hard to top that. I would recommend, there's a book I read recently called Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, where the author studied what makes up an effective culture. He looked at the San Antonio Spurs, the Navy SEALs, a couple other organizations. And I think it's really pertinent to residency programs as they think about how they're going to develop their own cultures, or even hospitals for that matter. There's a couple phrases in there that I find really interesting, such as skunking, which is when you spray negative energy all into the workplace.
I feel attacked.
We have a different term for skunking.
But all in all, there's some very practical advice, really just about ways that you can foster a not only a positive learning climate, but just a positive culture in general.
Kim?
So I'm currently reading the book Quiet by Susan Cain, and it was recommended to me by a med-ed chat that I was participating in, and really talking about the importance of recognizing quiet leadership and the importance of thoughtfulness and introversion, which has been really insightful to read.
Do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yes, definitely.
All right, Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, I'll just give a shout out to a book I'm currently reading, rereading, which is Every Patient Tells a Story, which is a really interesting book about kind of the art of diagnosis and getting back to the bedside, focusing on the history, focusing on the physical exam to make a medical diagnosis. And it's really refreshing to me. I actually read it initially during the first year of medical school, and now rereading it after about 7 more years of medical training. Both to see how far I've grown and also just refreshing in terms of getting back to the history and physical.
All right. I'm going to skip a pick of the week. That's plenty of picks for everyone to dig into. And I'm going to ask Stuart Brigham to read us a case here.
Okay. Benjamin Dunn, better known as Ben Dunn, is a rising PGY3. You, as a chief resident, meet with Ben to discuss his goals for his final year of residency. In response, he says, "Yeah, I think it'll probably be similar to PGY2. I mean, it's all of the same rotations and same responsibilities." How would you respond to that? What kinds of things are going through your head when you hear something like that? Wait, do you want me to keep going on in the case?
No, I think maybe then you could throw that question to a specific person, since we have 3
guests. Yes. Yes. So I'm going to throw it to the chief residents first. So, Kim, how would you respond to that? You just heard him say that he thinks it's going to be similar to PGY2. What's different about PGY3?
Yeah, I think that we've all heard that comment. And I think this is, in starting the encounter, a really important time, an opportunity to reframe how people think about their PGY3 year. And it's not just more of the same. This is the year where you're starting to build that identity of yourself as a leader, a clinician, and an educator, and really starting to grow in your independence.
Jeff, what about you? How would you respond to this?
Yeah, I would echo Kim with a couple of things. One, really, the goal of residency is to get towards progressive independence, and really PGY3 years, that time to shine is really an independent leader of the team, and really focus on going away from that direct supervision from your attending and being a good teacher and a good leader for your students, your interns, your residents, your junior residents. The other thing I'll really mention is that you really set the program culture as a PGY3. So if you're on time, if you have a good attitude, others are going to emulate that, and your program is really going to succeed. And the reverse is also true. If you're late, if you're disrespectful, you're really going to create a toxic environment as well. And so as the senior resident, you really set the tone of the program. And then lastly, there's a little bit more free time, a little bit more wiggle room during PGY3 year to really pursue your passions, whether that's quality improvement, research, or even something non-medical like going on a vacation that you definitely deserve. So I think that there's definitely some differences between PGY2 and PGY3 year, and I think those are three that I would definitely emphasize.
So Josh, Ben he's planning on meeting with you, and he wants to get some advice from you for the rest of his third year. He tells you that he's really wanting to become a hospitalist. He's been a star performer academically on all of his rotations, and he thought about doing a quality improvement program, or he thought about doing a quality improvement project, but wants to make sure his clinical skills are as sharp as possible. He's also considering academic medicine, but has only published one measly case report as an intern, and he's not sure how competitive he would be. How would you advise him moving forward from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, when we meet with our rising PGY3s, we really sort of do a couple things. One is take into account where they're at academically and making sure that from a program standpoint, we help them reach any milestones that they haven't reached yet. That's sort of from the program side. And then what we try to do is partner with them and figure out what particular areas that they really want to improve on. And so for someone like this who's thinking about being a hospitalist, we think about the hospitalist skills they might need, such as teaching, or if they do want to do quality improvement, and really, in some ways, actually coaching them to develop those skills. So ideally, if he's a third year, he could go through a quality improvement project, get some coaching on that. Or if he's, again, thinking about building his academic career, how could we potentially parlay that quality improvement project into a presentation at a meeting, or even into a publication in some way to sort of double tap the amount of work that he's doing.
Matt, you want to take it away from here, or you may keep going, or what?
I was just thinking about that, Josh. Some of the words you used, I just want to make sure people are understanding. You use the word milestone and use the word coaching. Can you kind of tell people what that means? Because not a lot of this audience that's listening to this might not speak like, all of us are in the world of teaching, but I think we need to kind of define these terms so that they can follow along, because these will come up throughout the show tonight.
Sure. So for all residencies, the ACGME, which is our accrediting body, establishes milestones that we aspire to hit. Certainly there's a level of competence, but then there's aspirational milestones that we track every 6 months throughout residency, with the goal of, by the end of third year, being competent in the milestones. And the coaching question, we sort of look at everyone gets feedback, but, can we take what someone wants to do? So in this case, it may be run a quality improvement project and really sort of walk through a coaching model, or we think about deliberate practice, where we set a goal, we ask them to go and do something, we give them feedback, we have them do it again, and we kind of go through this process, much like you would do with a sports coach or a music teacher. But the idea is you keep doing these things over and over and getting very specific coaching on the task that you're doing which hopefully ultimately will allow you to be more effective. This was really made popular a couple years ago by Atul Gawande when he wrote the article Personal Best, which I think many people have read. If you haven't read it, it's certainly worth reading.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before you sent it to us, and that's why I wanted you to dig into the coaching thing. And what struck me, I imagine there will be some attendings or some people at all levels listening to this, and the fact that as a resident, you should take advantage of the fact that there are coaches available to you, because once you become an attending, maybe you're lucky enough to be someone around Josh who studies this stuff and is probably coaching his peers or creating that type of culture, but it doesn't exist. And that's what Gwande was talking about in that article.
Yeah, I think it's when I do faculty development sessions, I often ask the audience of faculty, when's the last time you got feedback? And many of them are kind of looking at each other like, when I was in residency. So I think it's, your point is well taken, although I think there is a growing body of educators out there who are thinking about using coaching for faculty to improve their teaching or other skills. One of my personal favorite skills that I think all leaders should get coaching on is how to run an effective meeting.
Yeah.
But I think just in general, coaching could be used at all levels, but in general, residents are going to have the most available coaches in terms of, the educators who are already there teaching them.
Yeah. So residents, soak it up while you can, because it's very variable whether you'll get any once you leave the nest of your residency program.
Well, and it's more likely that you get coaching if you ask for it, because if you just assume that someone's going to do it, it's never going to happen. But if you ask for it, there are mentors out there and coaches out there that would very happily say, yes, I'd love to follow you on rounds, because, ultimately, as you approach kind of like the highlight of your career, you're wanting to actually make an impact on next generation's physicians after you, and that's one of the ways that you can do it. So I found the older physicians very receptive to providing that feedback, and then we as early career physicians, we've got to be willing to accept candid, very honest feedback and be willing to say, you know what, you're right. I didn't recognize that about myself. Maybe I could run rounds a little bit more efficiently or a little better, and ultimately make you a better teacher and allow you to mentor this PGY3 who wants to be a teacher more effectively as well. I think we've got to be very honest and candid with ourselves.
So maybe we can come back to the coaching piece a little bit later when we talk a little bit more about becoming independent. And Paul, did you want to take us into the next portion here?
I just wanted to throw one question there real quick. And this was something that came up during my PGY3 year. When should the resident, during his or her PGY3 year, when should they come to you and say, hey, I'm interested in this job or that job, or I'm interested in becoming a hospitalist? Is it something that they need to think about during their PGY2 year, or is it something that coming to you in the first part of the PGY3 year is sufficient enough to be able to get them on that path? Josh?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think it's whenever they come to that realization, because it's different for everybody. So I think if you come to that, during second year, come then. If you come during third year or later in third year, certainly the more time we have, the better, the more time we have to work with them. But I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, it's middle of third year, I haven't went to my program director, maybe it's too late. I mean, we still have lots of time to work on those skills.
So I want to maybe not necessarily switch gears, but actually touch on something that Josh talked about a little bit earlier, where you sort of set a goal and then try to achieve it. And it sounds to me, at least in Ben's case, that his goals are kind of nebulous. So you made it through second year, and I made it to third year, so it's like second year, but just more so. And maybe be a hospitalist, and probably I should be doing some research. It sounds like he might benefit from some more concrete goal setting. So I think I'd like to ask our chief residents, who clearly are goal directed and sort of moving towards things, how can we help Ben sort of set clear, specific goals throughout his third year to kind of achieve hopefully his ultimate goal of actually becoming a graduated doctor? So let's start with Jeff, and then I'd like to hear from Kim too, please.
Yeah, I think it starts with that growth mindset, with really wanting to improve and looking at what you think you need to improve with. And it also, in terms of, I know Josh mentioned working with a coach, but with sitting down with someone, going through your clinical competency letter, seeing what you think you need to improve on, and setting some goals, both on what you think that your CCC thinks you need to improve on to get to that independent provider, but also things you want to work towards, whether that's a short-term goal, like just doing a really good job teaching noon conference, or whether that's a long-term goal like a quality improvement project, but really setting those goals and working with a mentor to really be able to achieve those goals and have a clear path going forward.
Jeff, could you tell people what the CCC is and what's their function?
Yeah, absolutely. So in your program, you have the Clinical Competency Committee, or CCC, and what that is it's a group of individuals that look through your evaluations and compare them to those ACGME milestones that Josh had mentioned, and really identify both your strengths and also areas that you can improve on, and you can use those that feedback in order to continue to improve and continue to work towards that independence.
So I guess I would ask Kim, as someone who has sort of transitioned from someone who's just sort of been recently helped by the program to establish and sort of achieve goals, as to someone now in program leadership where you're helping others, what mechanisms exist to sort of help your trainees actually develop and achieve the goals?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that come to mind when you ask that question. And this is something that definitely, as I've been furthering my career, that I've been thinking about, but then also in the chief resident role, in meeting with residents. So Jeff and I this year, we met with each resident individually, and in those meetings, we had them list out goals for the year, and goals for their medical career. And in it, forcing them to take some time to think about those short-term goals that Jeff mentioned. So one of the analogies in our program that we've used as running is we've got sprint goals. Those are your short-term goals. They may take a lot of energy in the short period of time, but then you've achieved it. You've got your intermediate time frame goals, so the mile-long goal, which may be publishing a paper, working on a quality improvement project, and then those long-term goals, so your marathon goals. And these are things that take long-term investment and long-term planning ahead, and there may be multiple short goals within the process that you're thinking about. So first, making sure that you're thinking about goals as far as the time frame for them. And then something that we use with patients in our clinic, and I think also important to use with yourself as you're developing goals, is that SMART framework. So making sure that as you're coming up with your goals, and when you're thinking about these by yourself or with your mentor or your coach, that you're coming up with those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and then time-bound goals.
Are you actually having people come in your office and you write some of these out together and you help them identify this is more of a sprint goal, this is more of a marathon goal? What does this look like?
Yeah, so we have a form that the residents get before meeting with us and fill out before coming with us that have the 3 goals listed under each of these different, your sprint, your mile, your marathon. And then as we're meeting, talking about what needs to happen or could happen to help them towards those goals, and how we as a program can help, and or identifying other mentors for them.
So I think personally, the one that I struggle with the most, and this is obviously me using the podcast to further my own career, as is per usual. So I'd like to ask Josh, the long-term goal is the thing that kills me every time. Even still, it's where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? I am still stymied by that question every single time, even when I know it's coming at me like a freight train. So I guess how do you help people develop the longer term goals? Because I feel like the short term are pretty easy to come up with, but sort of the ultimate destination for me, once it was making it to a doctor, I was kind of like, well, yeesh, now what? And I'm still kind of in that same situation. So how do you help your learners and your trainees develop sort of longer term goals?
That's a great question. I had asked Kelly Skeff, who was the program director at Stanford, I think for over 20 years, what he asks when he's mentoring residents. And he said to me, I just asked them what they're really passionate about. And I was kind of waiting like for the next question. And he's like, no, that's it. And then once I know what they're passionate about, then we try to think about what roles or what jobs would fit into, that career, that passion. I think, some people, it's probably okay if you don't know what you want to do in 3 to 5 years. If you're happy with what you're doing, do it well. Continue to sort of build your clinical skills. If you're interested in other areas, quality improvement, other things, build those skills. And then you can decide whether you want to go the academic route or the quality improvement route or the clinical administrator route. So I don't necessarily know that you always have to have a 3 to 5 year plan. I think if you do, it makes it much easier to then sort of lay out the steps that you would need to take along the way. And we actually have a sheet we use when we're mentoring where it is basically a staircase and, where you're at the bottom and where you want to be and what are sort of those steps along the way that'll help you to get there. But that probably didn't answer your question and solve your life problem.
So yeah, me specifically, if you could just
Paul's like,
you could speak to that.
Just tell me what to do with my
Just tell me what to do. Someone, please. That's my entire career is that question.
Paul, though, I will say this. We've talked about this before offline. I had the exact same thing where I was just like, the only thing I had thought about was like, yeah, I'll probably get married, have kids, become a doctor. And then like, I'm like, all right, now I'm 30. I've done all those things. What do I do? Then I freaked out. And then the answer was start a podcast. But, Kim?
Matt, one of the things that I think we didn't quite mention, but you started to hit on is the importance of those personal goals. So whether it's starting a podcast, having a family, being physically fit, reading books, watching sci-fi movies, that it's important, like not only to be setting those career goals for yourself, but also personal goals as we go along.
Yeah, someone was talking about this on Twitter, how Shreya, our good friend Shreya, sets a wellness goal. Like when she meets with her team at the beginning of like a couple week rotation, they set like wellness goals. She's very good about doing that. I think that's a good thing.
I think it's gonna be my first wellness goal, setting a wellness goal.
Well, let's talk about another big thing that happens. Speaking of kind of, I guess this would maybe be a mile goal, like an intermediate goal, the board preparation, or maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe depending on where you're at. I felt like a marathon to me. But Jeff and Kim, what advice do you have? I hope you both did well on boards if you've taken them. But what advice do you have?
Yeah, I can start. I think I would call it a marathon. I've never run a marathon, but for sure felt like that. I think it's important to have a clear plan that really is tailored to your learning style. I really believe that one size does not fit all. That being said, I think there are some certain things that are definitely guaranteed to provide success. One is to do practice questions and do more practice questions and do more practice questions. Because really it's that recognition of those illness scripts that's really going to allow you to succeed on the boards, because that's really what they're asking. And I think it's important to, when you read the questions on those practice questions, that you're really reading, think about the answer and committing to an answer. And then after that, seeing whether the answer is right or wrong, and understanding why the right answers are right, or why the right answer is right and why the wrong answers are wrong, and the reasoning behind that, because that's really what's going to, that active retrieval is really what's going to let it stick in that long-term memory. Another thing that we do in our program is we have all the residents review the in-training objectives that they got wrong. So the objectives for the in-training exam. Because I think a lot of times we really focus on what we're good at. So I'm really good at this specialty, this subject. So I'm going to keep reading about it, keep doing questions on it. And then I'm neglecting those things I'm not very good at. But by focusing on those learning objectives that you didn't do well on, and working with a near-peer mentor, if you're a PGY2, that's a PGY3, or maybe one of the chief residents, and really going through those learning objectives that you missed on the IT exam to really understand what they're getting at. And I think that those two things can really set you up for success for boards.
Kim, any additional tips or things you found helpful in studying?
Yeah, I think that's great. I just wanted to clarify what Jeff was saying. So our junior house officers select a mentor, either a young or a early career physician or a senior resident, to help them through their learning objectives that were missed on the ITE or the in-training exam. And so they'll maybe do 5 a week of missed in-training exam objectives and come up with the answer to, like, how to diagnose sinus tachycardia, and then send what they learned to that senior resident who is now like secretly studying by reviewing those objectives for that second year, while also adding more information to the second year. Like, oh, because I've been reading and doing all of these questions, here's how they will ask that question, and here's what you need to be thinking about. The only other thing that I would add is attend your academics. Whatever your program does, if it's morning report, if it's a noon conference, if it's an academic half day, I know just from this past couple of months with Jeff and I planning them that we're spending a great deal of time thinking about not only clinically high yield things, but also things that will come up on exams. And so I think a lot of people will sometimes say, the academics, that's just not how I learn, but there's great value in it. And so those are the things: academics, reading study materials, doing question banks, like Jeff said.
And with the selection of the mentor, is that based on good interpersonal fit or content expertise, or how do the junior residents choose the senior residents as their mentors?
The way we do it in our program is that the residents get to choose. So it might be somebody that they admire or that they jibe well with.
Josh, you looked like you had a follow-up to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Kim and Jeff talked a little bit about this, and they have also modeled this year for our program. But from a program director standpoint, thinking about how we teach to prep for the boards, with the idea that we learn best when we do have to retrieve facts. So asking a lot of open-ended questions, really forcing people to commit. I know our residents, I think, are getting tired of us saying to bring their books and actually be prepared to write things down and answer questions. And then we've also done a lot of spaced learning. So the idea that we cover things during the week, and then Kim and Jeff have done a quiz at the end of the week. And then we're planning on doing a quiz probably every 2 to 3 months, reviewing that stuff as well. But this idea of spaced repetition, retrieval, and then comparing and contrasting the right and wrong answer, I mean, those are some of the more proven ways to help retention and ultimately meet your marathon goal of passing the boards.
Yeah, I think the book Made to Stick is a good one, by the Heath brothers. They talk about all these things, like the more ways, and I think they talked about the spacing in there, where it's like, you review it in a day, in a week, in a month, or some number of spaces, and that really makes things stick more than if you just kind of cram and then you immediately forget it. Stuart, did you cram for boards?
So I did not do anything that you guys just said. I was a broke father of 4, so MixSap had this wonderful thing where you have 24 hours of access for free. So in 24 hours, I did 300 questions, figured out I was fine, took the boards, and I passed just fine. But don't take my example. Please don't do that. It's not a good way to study for boards. Some of us can do that, some of us can't. The thing is, like, I would read a question, I would just see the key words, be like, there's the answer, next question, there's the answer. I mean, that's just the way my brain works.
You just reminded me, in case people haven't heard, we did some clinical reasoning episodes with Gurpreet Dhaliwal. We talked about the question, the prompt is like this problem representation of, like, and then the illness script that Jeff mentioned is where you start to build this like idea of, okay, pneumonia, there's a consolidation on imaging, there's fevers, there's symptoms of pneumonia, that's your illness script. And then you start to build from there various presentations of it, but that's what you're trying to match up. You read the problem representation, and then you're trying to match it to the illness scripts that you're starting to learn and build. Just in case go on.
To be fair, I actually kept a a case log and patient log during residency, and specifically wrote out my illness scripts during residency. And I wrote them out like once or twice, and then I was done. Because once you commit that to memory and you know the mental gymnastics to get to the answers, I mean, I think it's pretty much in your long-term memory at that point. So that's really what helped me prepare for boards, was putting that down. Yeah, Josh, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I would say too, I think you're right on. And if you keep a book or notebook at morning report and you just highlight or circle the things that are important and you go back through that a few times, I mean, that's as good as gold and probably cheaper than most board study materials.
Right. Yeah. That's more effective than the cramming at the end like that. So doing the mix-up questions at the end wasn't really cramming. It was more just verification that what I had done and validation that what I'd done in residency was the correct thing.
Let's, Paul, why don't we go on to kind of like the whole point of residency, becoming independent, and I think we should talk about that a little bit here to kind of round things out. Yeah,
so it's like as we mentioned earlier with Ben, rather than framing PGY3 as just PGY2 but more so, or PGY2 but marginally less terrified, it's probably or at least terrified of different things. Like now it's just terrified of the future as opposed to what you don't know. So maybe it might be helpful to talk about the actual specific skills that you should be honing as you kind of work your way through the PGY3, so we can actually give people something concrete to work on in this year as they transition into the next step of their career, whether it be fellowship or staff or whatever. So let's start with Kim in terms of what sort of skills do you think that they should, broad categories of skills that our residents should be focusing on in the third year?
Yeah, so I think broad categories, so first and foremost is you as a doctor and a clinician, and the patient care that you've been training to give. We talk about how you as that senior resident are the leader of your team and the leader of your residency program. And so being a leader is another broad skill to hone and develop during your third year. And then finally, I'd say being an educator. So if you're at an academic center or a community hospital with a residency program, you're going to be working with medical students, interns. You've got first year and second year residents all looking up to you and learning from not only what you're teaching, but how you act. And so making sure that you're thinking about those three things, I would say.
And then I might ask Jeff, so it seems to me the clinical skills, you tend to get constant feedback on either by passing the boards or your patients living, or even sort of on rounds, I'd like to do this, and then your attending argues with you. It seems like the how to be an educator and how to be a leader are a little bit less concretely taught, at least in my own personal experience. So I guess, why don't we start with the teaching? What kind of things can we do to sort of help our PGY3s become more effective educators?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple things we can do. One is to put them in the positions where they really are having those opportunities to teach. So one thing we do with our senior residents is have them lead a noon conference, have them work through the case. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll actually videotape them. And we'll go over those videos with them and then talk about, hey, this is a time where you kind of gave the group the answer instead of really trying to work towards that active retrieval and work towards having them get to the answer themselves. And so I think that direct feedback is really important. And then also encouraging them as a team leader to really find some topics that they're very passionate about and then work with the interns and work with the residents in terms of those specific teaching skills. But I think the most important thing is to put them in those positions to succeed and then have them do it, give them direct feedback on that, and then have them do it again and give more feedback and create this cycle where we're creating a culture where really the goal is to continue to improve and we're giving direct feedback about how to do that.
And then I guess, Josh, along those same lines, because I think this is something that you think critically about, and we've talked on the podcast before, but how do you teach someone to be a leader? I feel like a lot of us think it's something innate, but how do you actually kind of train and help someone develop leadership skills?
Yeah, great question, and definitely an area that I'm interested in. I think it goes to several things. First off, I mean, our senior residents and really our junior residents are leading on an everyday basis, right? They're leading their clinical ward teams. They're leading when they're in the ICU. They're leading the residency as everyone is looking up to them. So I think they have a lot of experiential opportunities to improve. Ideally, if programs can pair that with a actual curriculum where they teach them about different leadership things, and then you can give them additional feedback on the skills that you're talking about. So if you teach them about emotional intelligence and then they're on the wards and someone blows up at a nurse, you can talk about self-awareness and self-regulation. Or if someone is sitting in a meeting and rolls their eyes, you can talk about those things. If you're doing change management, there's specific steps and leadership strategies to being an effective change agent, which for a lot of our graduates, when they leave, they're going to go out and be expected, if they're hospitalists, to run quality improvement programs. So how do they do that? Giving them skills such as the Cotter model or Start with Why with Simon Sinek. I mean, there's so much you could teach. I think the first step, though, is getting them to realize, like, hey, this is important and we want you to learn something about it. And then, each program trying to do what they can to help prepare the residents for it.
I think the challenging thing about residency, it's a lot of people's first jobs, and if they went straight through, they might have never had a job, and they certainly probably never managed people before. For me, I had plenty of jobs, like paper routes and cashier, restaurants, all that stuff, but I never managed people. I was terrible at it. I still think I have a long way to go. And there's lots of books you can read in this area. I think just looking to people that have been fun to work for and trying to reflect on why is a good thing to do. And I think that's part of how PGY3s can be a good example to PGY2s. Sort of looking at who are the senior residents I liked working with, what did they do, what did I like what they did, what didn't I like what they did, and then I think that's a good way to do it. Do you all observe people on rounds other than, is there a way, we talked about coaching a little bit before, in that Atul Gawande paper he was talking about having like a coach there watching him. Do you all have anything like that in place?
So one thing that we try to do, especially on the wards, is feedback Fridays. So our model is really that the medical students and the interns are presenting on rounds to the resident. That the resident is acting as the attending, coming up with a plan, and the attending is there in an educational role and a supervisory role. And then really at the end of the week, or even more often, they're sitting down with the whole team, but definitely the residents, and talking about, okay, maybe you could have done this better, or this patient interaction could have gone differently for this reason, or maybe you should get the team to sit at the bedside instead of standing over the patients at the bedside. So really feedback-based model with frequent feedback on a weekly basis, because really there's nothing more frustrating as a resident than get through your 4-week rotation and the attending sits you down on the very last day and says, oh, I think this interaction could have gone better, or I think you could have taught this skill differently. And so, our model is really frequent feedback based on interactions, based on observation.
Is that so? That's a good yeah, I think, meeting with everybody sequentially takes a long time. Do you just sometimes sit down with the whole team and just like kind of air things out? Like, how's it going? I liked when the team did this. I didn't. How are you doing this for efficiency's sake?
Yeah, that's a good point. So typically what I like to do, and what I did as a resident, and also what I've done as a very junior attending, is actually have the resident give feedback to the members of the team, and then at the end I'll give the resident feedback. It is time consuming, but I think it's worthwhile. I think if there's things that the whole team could really benefit from learning, then I think it's good to sit them all down at once. So if it comes to getting the nurses involved in rounds, or really working towards sitting at patients' bedsides, things like that I think all the team members could grow from. And that's a time when I think it's good to give that feedback to everyone. But I also think that individual feedback is also really valuable.
Well, it sounds like you're really explicit about it too. Like the fact that you've codified it and built it into it is great, because I think a lot of the time feedback just kind of whizzes past. I think we may have talked about this before, but Daryl Moyer would often say, she'll always preface things with saying, I'm going to give you feedback now, because if you don't say that out loud, it just kind of breezes past you. You don't realize you're actually getting specific feedback. It just feels like conversation. So the fact that you build it in and are very explicit about giving feedback and make it part of the process, it seems genius.
Yeah, I just might add that this year we have a few of the residents who are going through part of a formal educational certificate with the university of the Uniformed Services University, which we are co-located with. And as part of that, they're actually doing a teaching practicum. So we do plan to go and watch them on the wards and in different settings, observe them, give them feedback, much like the coaching model. So we'll see how that works. We'll report back to you.
Let me ask Kim. So it sounds like as your program, you actually have sort of codified, and I think it's the second time I've used that word, making me super duper pretentious. Actually, having the resident serve as attending, and then having the intern serve as the resident, sort of role modeling leadership. So I wonder if you can sort of talk through just explicit skills that you coach your residents on when they're running pretending rounds or whatever the nicer term it is that you guys call them.
Just rounds.
Oh, touche.
She's like, thanks for condescending, Paul. It's just rounds.
So there's a couple of different things. One, on rounds, it can often be people's instinct to be presenting to the attending in presence. And so something that I do, and a lot of the attendings that I admire did when I was a resident, was making sure that the medical students and the interns were presenting to the senior resident on the team. And that gives them the sense of, okay, they're talking to me. Not only do I have to pay attention to what they're saying, but I then have to answer their question about, should I diurese this person or give them fluids? Or do I do both? Don't do both. So putting that just in a physical sense and giving them that power physically, and then as the attending, making sure that you're forcing the resident to answer that question and not letting them off the hook easy. So even in cases of uncertainty, kind of having them make a decision, and then if it's something where it's safe to going along with it, and having them see how their decision ultimately plays out.
I love that answer. That concept has only been recently. I was talking to someone at a conference about it. This gentleman had a whole lecture about like the attending being in the room or on rounds, like everyone sort of just naturally, like, especially if they look markedly older than the rest of the team, everyone just sort of that is going to be like presenting or talking or directing everything to that person. But as an attending, trying to like make yourself small on rounds and like not be front and center as much. I had never really thought about that. Definitely need to work on not, on like stepping out of the picture so that everyone else can shine and do their thing. I think that's a really great point. Josh, you have anything to say about this topic?
No, I think Kim pretty much hit them all. The one thing that she mentioned, just to emphasize, is the don't rescue the resident, because very often I think the resident will look to the attending if they are there, and it's often easy for the attending just to give the answer. But I think just shooting it back to the resident and say, what would you like to do? Because I think really the way that we get them to learn is to commit, and even if you're there, you can get them to commit. So I think just don't rescue them when they're trying to make those decisions.
Yeah,
and so I would imagine being in the role, even if you're pretending to be the attending, is still would be somewhat nerve-wracking, and I think that's why you have the tendency to sort of ask questions. So I guess and sort of frame things as like, I guess we could do this or we could do that, or sort of just pause and hopefully somebody will answer the question for you. So I guess I'll ask Jeff, how do you build confidence might be the question that I would ask when you're trying to sort of build up the PGY3 as they're making the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts with recognition of those great decisions that they are making. So I totally will echo what Kim and Josh said in that going from the plan being in the form of a question, like, I think we should diurese ? To I think we should diurese. Like, this is what we're going to do. And then as the attending, if there's something you really strongly agree with, and like a great management decision they made, to tell them, I really agree with that decision. And I think that's going to build that confidence. And I think if it's like a decision you don't necessarily agree with or something that you would do a little differently, to really explain your thought process such that if a similar case happens later on, then they're going to think through it and maybe make a little bit of a different decision. And then when that other decision is made, to really, again, emphasize that you really agree that this is a great decision. I would also really emphasize the idea of understanding why we're doing things. So as a team, one thing I like to do is just, hey, this was a study. This is why we're putting this patient with heart failure on a beta blocker. And one thing my current resident is doing really well is writing down any tips that I have and then utilizing them later in the week. So I think it's as the attending really important to encourage your residents and really tell them when they're doing a really good job.
I don't think we're going to have time to get too much into quality improvement. I know that that's been mentioned a couple times here. Josh, is there any resources that you utilize as a program to teach people that? Do you have someone in-house that's an expert in it? Like, what if residents are interested in that as part of their development? What resources should they use?
I think the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, is available to everyone. They actually offer scholarships or partial scholarships to residents occasionally, and those courses are very well done. So I think that's a great resource that people can look to.
And we've done the early career episode. I will say, if you put on your resume that you love quality improvement and that you're facile, if that's the right word to use, people love that. That is an attractive thing for employers. Hospitals and groups are really looking for people who are interested and have skills in that topic. So it's definitely a way to distinguish yourself. Well, that said, I think we should ask for take-home points, and we'll start. Josh, you're most senior. We'll start with you as the program director. What's your favorite one or two takeaways that you wanted to give to the audience?
Sure. I'm gonna talk a little bit about culture, which we sort of talked about at the beginning. So I think as a PGY3 or rising PGY3, you set the tone for the whole entire program. And I look at those PGY3s in our programs really as the leaders of our program. They're the ones who do the most teaching, and they recruit our next class of residents. And there's a quote by Simon Sinek that leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. So I think as senior residents, it's really about taking care of your junior residents, your interns, your medical students, and working not only to help educate them, but just make your program better overall.
Kim?
So we talked a lot about how this PGY3 year is an opportunity to develop yourself as an educator, as a leader, as an excellent clinician. And in truth, each of these alone is an impressive undertaking. As senior residents, you've got second years, first years, medical students all looking up to you, all coming to you with questions and looking to you for advice. And that's huge, and it can be intimidating. This year, certainly, with all of these increased responsibilities, it can be normal to feel overwhelmed, or I don't know. Am I doing this right?
You're doing perfect.
To put some term, like the common term of imposter syndrome to it, is not uncommon, may even be normal for this PGY3 year, especially as you start to envision yourself as a independent clinician outside of residency.
Oh yeah, no, I'm PGY 9 or 10 now at this point, and I'm still waiting to be found out, and I feel like I am on an almost daily basis. So that's a great point.
All right, Jeff, last word to you.
I'll end with emphasizing the importance of a longitudinal study plan for the boards. So I really believe it is a marathon, not a sprint. My advice would not be to do 300 questions right beforehand, but to do 5 or 10 questions. And as Josh mentioned, comparing and contrasting the right and wrong answers, reviewing the IT objectives you missed, and really having a good study plan so you're not trying to cram at the end. It's that stressful test we all know is coming at the end of PGY3 year. But I think if you have a good long-term study plan, you're going to do just fine.
For the record, I never said that my method was the best method.
It was implied.
Ooh, could I add one more?
Yeah, of course. This is overtime now.
So maybe in the outtakes. But just again, wanting to hit on the importance of goal setting and taking the time now and at the beginning of the year and then throughout the year to set goals, both professionally and personally.
This has been another episode of the Curbsiders, bringing you a little knowledge food for your brain hole.
Still yummy.
Get your show notes at thecurbsiders.com/podcast and sign up for our mailing list at thecurbsiders.com/knowledge food to get our weekly show notes in your inbox.
That's right, Paul, because we're committed to providing you with high-value, practice-changing knowledge, and to do that, we need your feedback, so please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, or contact us at thecurbsiders@gmail.com. A special thanks to our producers for the show, Drs. Jeffrey Gray, Kim Fabyan, and Josh Hartzell, and to our social media team, Hannah R. Abrams on Twitter, Beth Garbatelli on Instagram, and Chris the Chew Man Chew on Facebook. Until next time, I've been Stuart Kent Brigham.
And I've been Dr. Matthew Frank Watto, and I'd just like to remind everybody that Dr. Stuart Kent Brigham made this wonderful theme music that you're hearing right now. Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome, Paul.
Great stuff. And I remain Dr. Paul Nelson Williams. Thank you and goodbye.
Good night.
I literally was going to compliment you on how well we were doing with the read. I thought the energy was right. I thought we were doing good, and that just came crashing to a halt as soon as you got to the producer line.